Have a relationship.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, lead by example. Very important.
Yes.
It's easier. What people don't realize is that children learn from you all the time. And a lot of the times they learn from what you do as opposed to what you say.
Right.
Long as I'm alive, I'ma make a plan. Strongholds to break, got long walks to take, got no votes to make. We don't bet, we pray. Hey, African man, yeah. The African male iris through the eye of an African male.
100%, bro.
Right?
I can confirm this because my parents are pastors.
Yeah.
The things
Where
that
PK? No wonder why he's
That's where the name comes from.
the things that I remember my dad turned 69 last month, and when we were doing his birthday dinner, I actually, as the firstborn son, you know, I was just like, I was like, guys, we're gonna do this very differently this time around. We are going to all share one thing that we've learned from this man. And I suggest you do that. When you're celebrating someone's birthday, share the things that you've learned from them.
Wow.
That's
Because
profound.
those are things,
Yeah.
there are things that they're things you catch, but you don't necessarily give that person feedback and say, I watched you and I learned this and this is what I do now. And like my dad got emotional that day because everyone who was there had so much stuff to say and he didn't know that that's the kind of impact he was having on people. Because my dad is not a very confrontational person. Like I get this from my mom. This side of
the gangster side.
this side of me is from my mom. So my dad is not let's talk about feelings, let's talk about very closed up about that. If you're gonna talk about sports cars, Ford Rangers, like dude, he's there. You know?
Yeah.
And so we just started going on talking about stuff that we learned. And I actually said to him, the thing I learned from my dad was that when you don't know something, you are only ignorant for seconds until you ask what it is.
Yeah.
And then when you know it, no one can ever take it away from you.
Yeah.
And so you will always move with confidence.
That's deep.
If you're always open to asking.
Yeah. And what does that mean? I've got to be humble enough to be okay with asking.
Yes.
So there's humility in that as well.
Exactly. And making peace with the fact that I don't know everything. So I might as well ask.
Yeah.
Because what that does then is it allows you to always be a conduit of this information and you just get to know, you just get to build relationships with, and that's what my dad's strength is. He will be there for people. He's not a talker, so he's not going to be, he's
But
not
he's
the best
there.
person to encourage you and say, you know, my son, let me tell you about life.
Yeah.
He's not that guy. I hear stories about my dad from my mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, this guy was a rock star. You know, then I'm like, maybe that's where I also got it wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he would never sit me down and say, this is what I did in the past and whatever.
Right.
But my mom will tell me some of these things. Then I'd realize, oh, okay, but he's not that guy. But what he will do is he will show up for people.
And there's a lot of strength in that, in the sense that I'm always taken back to the Bible. I think all of us are religious. We grew up in,
Of course.
went to mission schools.
Yes.
And so if you go to the book of Job, when Job was goishing, as they would say in Xhosa, he was everything. He lost everything.
Right.
It got so deep that 3 of his friends came to comfort him. And when they came, for 7 days and 7 nights, they could not say a word because of how deep.
Yeah, like
was.
they had no words of
There
encouragement.
was no
nothing.
words. There was nothing they could say. But that's the power of presence, right? And I would rather much take along in my life journey somebody that shows up for me. They don't have to say a thing, but they're there for me.
They're there.
Right?
Yeah.
Because not many people do that. Not many people show up. So it's not always, I also get asked sometimes like, you know, my friend has just lost his dad. What do I say to him? I'm like, you don't have to say anything.
Just be there.
Just be there. So we live in a world that's so consumed with saying the right thing and being politically correct. And sometimes all we need is your presence.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you ever, let's talk a little bit about love. Have you guys ever been with a person where you just want to be there with them.
100%.
Yes.
You don't have
You
to
don't
be
have
talking.
to be talking, right? But it's so deep. It's like you're like,
Yes.
and there's this sense of relief
Yes,
that
just-
happens
you're just
internally. You're
there.
like, I'm okay now because I'm with you, or I saw
You
you.
guys are happily married, right? I can tell. I can tell.
But over and above that,
Yeah,
I
get it.
think it's essentially, I think we're talking about parenting, and I was just saying, have a relationship with the kids, but also lead by example.
Because they catch more than
They
listen.
catch a lot more than you actually
listen.
say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
And I would venture to say also, be very careful of how you act when you're angry
Around the kids.
and what you
good one.
say when you're angry.
Yeah, because that speaks to a lot of like self-discipline.
Exactly,
and
it does.
Self-control.
It does. You find it all the time. Sometimes we get called into schools or whatsoever. They're like, yeah, no, this child is violent, or whatsoever. When you sit down with the parents, you're like, yeah, they're like, yeah, but you know, in our house, no one is violent. Or I'm like, okay. But automatically we know, there's something going on in this house.
Someone's violent.
Right? It may not be physical,
Right.
but the fact that there is the raising of voices and something actually quite profound as well. Parents, be careful of what you say to your children, especially when you're not happy with them, because when they grow up, your voice becomes their inner voice. So if you're the person that's forever
They get
saying,
discouraged. They get
if you're the person that's saying, yeah, you're useless, they will feel that and continue. I see people in corporate, for example, who lack self-esteem,
Right.
low self-confidence.
Dude, that's actually one of the questions. So I'm glad you were going there.
Yeah, and a lot of the times it's just because
Yeah.
of parenting.
parenting.
Yeah,
Right. So I'm glad you went there.
Yeah.
So this question is from one of our followers.
yeah.
They brought a very interesting angle, and they said, "What would you say are the biggest challenges with African men in business?" Now, I want to give some more context from like a personal perspective.
Yeah.
Now, I run my own company.
Yeah.
We do Airbnbs, and we manage them. We've got our own, and we're trying to just grow that.
Yeah.
Right. We're trying to also diversify with time and build cash flow. Blah blah. You
Yeah.
know the typical, right?
Yeah.
Now, you don't get to see, like, because I'm such a fan of business, real estate, always personal development, trying to understand all of these things. The more you read and understand business, the more you understand that the core values of business are very simple.
Yeah.
Figure out something valuable, sell it, and
Yeah,
then scale.
that's it.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing that we miss, because as black people, it's easy to find value. You realize Saturday people don't have a plan. You start a shisa nyama by the corner, and then people start coming. Then you
Yeah.
throw in a car wash because there's nice cars coming. Now you know. So it's almost like as Africans, African men specifically,
Yeah.
we know how to identify a gap and see the value. What I feel like we fail to do dismally is stay in power
Yeah.
to build something that will last.
That's sustainable.
Yeah.
Because when I was going on tour, like the years I was going on tour as a musician, I would tour a lot of Europe, mainly Germany. And there was a day I was blown away and I was deep in thought. Like I was lost. Because we're walking through this very small city. It was a day off. I didn't have any shows on that day. I just played a big festival. And I saw a building from the 19th century, bro. And people live in it.
Yeah.
And it was written, built in, I think it was 1849 or something. It was there. And then I stopped and I asked, I said, was this building built in 1849? And they were like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I realized no one was impressed by that. Because culturally,
It's a
they
normal
build
thing.
things
Yeah.
to last forever.
Yeah.
It's the European way.
Yeah.
That's why they have so many museums. That's why they have so many things to, like, because they'll say this company has been here for, I didn't know that. There were some companies that I discovered were originally German, but they then went global.
Yeah.
And then they sold the franchise or whatever. Like, I think it was Spa. I think it was Spa, the Spa franchise. I'm not so sure. But I remember saying, "Oh, you've got this," and then they're like, "No, this is actually German." And then it just went to the world, and
That's
sold
why
the
their
franchise and
history
whatever.
is still very rich.
Yes. So because of that, I'd like if you could like sort of get into the psyche of why it is that we can't expect Winterton to be here 100 years from now, because it needs to be.
Yeah.
Because the work is always going to be here.
Yeah.
Why do we not build brands that will-
Generational.
Yes, exactly. What's going on there?
Okay, so disclaimer: Winterton Consulting will be here.
Yes, come on.
100%.
Of that, I will make sure. So it's a couple of things. So number one, I don't want to discount the impact of what we call the imposter syndrome,
Right.
where because many of us don't come from backgrounds where we had businesses,
Right.
where our fathers ran businesses.
Right.
We are the Elijahs of our generations. We're starting.
Yes.
And so we don't have a lot of historical resilience or bankable resilience that we can tap into, right? Because of that. So some of us fail because of that. That's one.
Okay.
So you do it well, but you still have that self-doubt. Am I good enough? And. But the one thing I've seen, from studies, from research, is you gotta build systems. A business should not be about me. A business is essentially systems. If your company cannot run in your absence, you're not a businessman, you're self-employed.
Not a business, yeah.
100%.
You're self-employed.
100%.
So it's about building systems, because it's systems that sustain a business. So I'm not even worried about us finding value. We're good at that. Like you said, we find value. I'm not even going to worry about, we can speak some of the pitfalls, obviously, or some of the shortcomings, or some of the challenges would include funding, etc. But I'm going to pack that aside. There are venture capitalists all over that can fund some of these things. It's about systems. And then the third thing that we struggle with is separation. It's linked to systems. We struggle to separate ourselves from the businesses. Understanding that a business is a going concern, it's a juristic person outside of myself.
Right.
So I do a deal
Almost like we need to, our focus should be how can this thing run without me?
without me. So
It's
I do
also-
a deal, I make 300K, then I think it's my 300K. It's not. It belongs to the business.
Right.
So if I had set up systems properly, then either I draw a salary or I draw dividends from it.
Right.
So the problem is that we are running businesses like tuck shops.
Right.
And we're trying to go global. It's not going to work. You should always be thinking globally and acting locally, as opposed to trying to go global when you are thinking locally. It's not going to work. So systems, imposter syndrome, get rid of that. Get mentoring and coaching as well. That's the other missing link for a lot of us as black businessmen.
That keeps you the
That-
accountability.
we because you've got to have somebody that you're accountable to, somebody that can hold your hands and show you the way. But we've also got a network as well. You essentially, those things that your network is your net worth. True to a large degree, right? But systems, very important. And understanding that there is a separation. I mean, I have friends, I have people that were running businesses and they were getting paid in their personal account. I'm like, but it's a business. It needs to have a business account, right? And I think the other thing then is an over-fascination with big ideas.
Okay.
That's not where the money is. The money is in the small ideas.
Okay.
So people think for me to be in business, I need to think of something grand. No. Bro, for you to be in business, you need to be making 10%. If you go and buy Macheo at 80 Rand and then you come and sell them at 90 Rand, you're in business.
Yeah.
So it's not about some grand idea somewhere. It's about finding value.
right,
Like you say,
right.
creating value. When you've created value, then get mentorship, build systems, hold yourself accountable, and educate yourself. It's sad for me because what many people don't get, you don't necessarily need a business degree. There's YouTube. We have a lot of information that's available now, but we're not tapping into it. So educate yourself, whatever industry you find yourself in. Bro, if I sit now and I ask you, Prayer, tell me about real estate, you should know more than me
Of course.
because it's your sector.
Exactly.
But we're not doing the research. We're not tapping into the information that's there. We're not empowering ourselves by way of doing that short course or going on YouTube, doing research, etc. We're just blindly going in and hoping that things are going to work. And that's why we're not sustaining ourselves over a long period of time. If we had systems, number one, I actually have a neighbor, who ran, I think it was to some degree logistics. They would deliver river sand and whatnot for people who are building. And his son turned 18, finished matric, and essentially got him into the business.
Right.
That business is still running now. Because the other thing, again, is that as founders, we get so hung up on being founders, we forget to pass it on.
Pass it on. Yeah,
That's the other reason why businesses are not sustaining themselves. So, in essence, if you want to go global, you've got to have systems in place. It can't be a sole proprietorship where if you're not there, then the business doesn't exist. So these are some of the reasons why we're not sustaining ourselves. Over and above the fact that I get 300,000 Rand and then the next thing I'm thinking Range Rover. And I'm not thinking, let me reinvest in the business, let me actually expand the market and.
Do you think that comes from that same problem that we spoke about where men attach their identity to what they make?
Yeah.
You know? So it's almost like you start defining yourself by the company that you've built.
I want people to see that
I'm the face.
Yeah. It's essentially that. And yet, if you go into global businesses, even if you engage with some of the people that work there, they have no idea who owns it.
Right.
No flipping idea who owns it. I do a little bit of business. Okay, I'm not going to name the companies, but international companies, for example. And because I love things and I love information, I have to Google, but who owns it? Half of the people I interact with who are senior managers in that business, they have no idea who owns the business. So it's about wanting to be seen everywhere. That's also problematic because if we're forever seeing you, it means if I become the face of Winterton and I do something wrong publicly, the business is dead.
Right.
Essentially.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
But if we had a system in place where the business is seen outside of me, it's separate from me, whatever happens to me, the business continues.
Yeah, I mean, the free tip in real estate, the first thing measured towards is that when you're buying your first property, you don't buy it in your personal name.
Wow.
Right?
It's always the cushion of
That's something I wish I knew.
yes, exactly. You know, so it's the principle is like works across the board where you almost have to embrace the mindset where you are creating and building something that should live on its own.
Yeah.
And you should benefit from it, but it should be able to exist on its own.
That's why there are trusts.
Yes.
Buy everything in a trust. Put the company, the car you drive, put it in the trust.
Yes.
It's tax
And
deductible.
the company that owns the thing should be put in the trust.
In the trust.
Right?
Yes.
But this is why I'm saying it's sad because all of this information is out there.
It really
and
is.
half
And
the
it's
time,
free.
all we're talking about is, okay, who's sleeping with who? Like, how does that advance us as a black people, you know? So our conversations need to get better.
Change.
Yeah.
There's something that you mentioned as well about passing on the business to the next generation.
Yeah.
We had a discussion around this in a prior episode where, there was that argument to say, okay, the kid, is it right for me, for example, with the DJing and sound, if I'm starting to train my child, my son, for example, who's about to be a teenager, and as much as maybe he's not necessarily interested, or maybe he's got a different focus area, but at least I've done the job of impacting the knowledge.
Yeah.
However,
Giving him a skill that he might not like,
Yeah.
but he can use.
he can use.
I agree with that. So obviously we need to give them free will.
Right.
But if you do the research and you can, after this episode, you can.
I read that. Yes.
The quickest way to build wealth is through a family business.
Right.
That's the quickest way.
Yep.
So it's essentially a business that potentially could be passed down from father to son or father to daughter, because that's also possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So my take would be they're at an age where they don't have as much agency as yet, because I mean, you're still living under my roof. So let's go DJing fun.
Yeah.
Let me show you how
Come
to
carry
set up
the speakers,
signs. Carry the speakers and if you decide you want to go become Ronaldo or Messi, it's fine. But at least know how to do this. Maybe you're going to need to do it for your sister. Maybe she's going to like it more. Yeah. But I need to expose all of you.
True.
And also for me then, make it worth his while. Make him earn a salary.
Yeah.
Whilst you're at it, because that's another way of retaining his interest, isn't it?
True,
And
true,
making him actually understand text. People were laughing when I was saying, it was actually on another show I was on, and I was saying, I text my nephews. They come, they do dishes, and I withdraw text. Because I'm trying to teach them.
That is
real
not all,
old.
it's not all yours.
Yeah, guys, there's something called SARS. It's gonna want its money.
SARS is gonna want their money.
And
That's a good one. That's a good one.
for me, though, I give it back to them indirectly. They don't see it, though. But for me, the whole idea is already they can tell you what pay-as-you-earn tax is. They can tell you what income tax is, and they haven't even gone to varsity.
Yet, yeah.
So these are things that our parents wouldn't have had time to teach us. They probably didn't understand those things. And that's why I keep saying we've got to do better. We can't raise our children in the same way that we were raised. Because right now, if I ask you, when you left school, did you know about tax? Many of us didn't.
No.
Right? And many of us might have actually even end up making mistakes. Next thing you all SARS and you don't even know. So it's about imparting all of this knowledge, because the one thing you must always remember, even when you're talking about parenting or even business, you're preparing this young man or this young woman for the future. And you're giving them an advantage if you're imparting a particular skill or particular knowledge that they're not going to find elsewhere.
And they might not find it valuable now.
But it might make sense someday
but
later.
also, guys, frankly speaking, we now live, I think that, if you travel a lot, you know what I'm talking about. We've essentially become just like Europe. We live in a gig economy now. It's no longer enough to have one job.
No,
Yeah.
definitely.
You've got to be able to do multiple things, right?
Of course.
So because of that, and I don't see that changing, unfortunately. I think that's just going to be the way of the world. We haven't reached Europe's level yet, but we're going there.
Yes.
Where literally, I mean, all of us have relatives overseas. You know that for a fact, they will tell you that, listen, I go to work from maybe 7 until 4. And then I have another job that I do from 5 until 9. Jalo. That's where we're going.
To add to that, sometimes when I watch that, what is it called? That Pop the Balloon dating show.
Oh,
Yeah.
Whenever a man or woman comes and they ask, so what do you do for a living? Sure. They'll list like 4 or
I'm
5
a writer,
things. Like
I'm a
do this,
builder,
I do
what? I sell real
Exactly.
estate.
I'm also podcasting. I'm also doing
Exactly.
this.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so that's multiple. You can't just say one thing and say,
No.
that's what I
Yeah,
do.
no, that's where
It's
the
the
world
way of
is
the
going.
world now.
Yeah, and also it's about understanding, for example, that whatever qualification you have, that's just a starting point.
Right.
So whether you're an accountant or whatsoever, it doesn't mean your whole life should just be about accounting.
Right.
You could very well be an accountant and a DJ. Quite possible.
Yeah.
So it's about teaching them all of these things, that the more skills you have, the better it becomes for you in terms of opportunities and making money.
That's true.
Yeah.
Man,
Sean, thank you so much,
it's
man.
always a pleasure.
Thank you
Sean.
for having me.
Absolutely, always a pleasure.
Thank you for
bro.
having me.
Definitely.
wow.
Yeah. And thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure having Sean, and there's so much to lean from this thing, man. Like,
Lots,
it's crazy. So we're glad that you've watched it right up until here, and would like to get your thoughts on it. Please follow Winterton Consulting on Instagram and then see the amazing work that they're doing. And give us a subscription while you're at it.
And the like.
Yes. Share the post or the clip or whatever it is. But we really appreciate you guys watching, and we really appreciate the support. So thank you so much. My name is Prayer Soul, and I'm out.
DJ Tino, and you know what? Whenever we got Sean here, you always need to remember that I am the interviewer. I'm the
Right.
because you'd be like, oh man, that's me. Okay, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling. So
Right.
it's really nice to have Sean around and taking time out of his busy schedule just to come and talk to us and impact a lot of knowledge. It's much appreciated, Sean. And thank you guys for tuning in. And Sean, any parting words from you?
These are the days of your lives. This is not a dress rehearsal, so take it as seriously as you can. And the whole idea is not to judge yourself. When you know better, do better.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
African Male Iris signing out.
Peace.
Cheers.
The motherland, the African man. Long as I'm alive, I'ma make a plan. Strongholds to break, got long walks to take, got no votes to make. We don't bet, we pray. Hey, African man, yeah. The African male iris through the eye of an African